Good morning, all. So, in our previous lecture, that is the last lecture, I was discussing on in Hayavadana, the importance of the character of Devadatta. And now, in this particular lecture, let us resume the importance of the major characters in Hayavadana, and let us go with the another major character, as I mentioned earlier, that is Kapila, obviously. So this is the first slide that was I was presenting in our previous lecture. It was the references of Devadatta, Kapila, and Padmini, and later on we can find that the other characters, that is Hayavadana, Bhagavata, the child, chorus, dolls, etc. These were also needed to be discussed in detail in the later sections. And in our previous lecture, we have discussed on the character of Devadatta, the importance of Devadatta, and now let us resume our lecture with the character of Kapila. So, as I mentioned earlier, that so far as the particular text Hayavadana is concerned, we have found that the characters are no longer to be considered as simply as individual character to be isolated completely from the society. Rather, the characters are representing a particular class, okay, and the characters are representing a particular status, obviously. So now let us think about Kapila. As I mentioned earlier in my last lecture regarding the character of Devadatta, that the society was divided into four major sections, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. So ultimately here also you will find the same thing is in operation. As the Devadatta was representing the character of a Brahmin, and you will find that somehow Padmini was representing the character of a lady coming from the families of the Vaishyas. Now you will find that another character, that is Kapila, who is coming from the lower section of the society. Why? Because Kapila's father, the name, as I mentioned, that the names of the fathers are very important and very significant. Here you will find that Kapila's father's name is Lohita. So the term Lohita is a Lohit, and from that particular term you can find the term like Loha, okay, or iron. It has to be taken in consideration. So so far as by work, you see, or from the perspective of a work, or maybe the typical kind of profession, you will find that uh, that means Kapila and others, Kapila and his family, they were blacksmiths by profession, right? And that particular formation is being related with the Shudras, you see, the workers to some extent. So at one point we have found that there was Devadatta, who was belonging to the class of the Brahmins. At another point we have found that Padmini is belonging to the Vaishyas, as Padmini's father was a businessman who earned a lot, as it has been described at the very beginning of this particular play. And now we have got the son of Lohita, Kapila, who was belonging to the blacksmiths, and blacksmiths are considered to be the Shudras, to be specific, to some extent, almost, because they're like the workers, you see. Though ultimately some of the blacksmiths can be also considered as earning a lot of money and gaining their status and position in the society and becoming just like the Vaishyas, but ultimately we can find such kind of differentiation is active here. So here you can get that Kapila is the son of Lohita, and Kapila does possess all the physical capabilities, and that's why there you can get he had the iron hard body. I am deliberately using the term iron. Why? Because with the particular term iron, I am trying to refer to his obvious profession. So whenever the term Devadatta has been related with knowledge, okay, somehow here also you can find the names of Kapila and Lohita and their profession is being associated with their temperament altogether. So that's why here you will get that he had the iron hard body, and he is very skilled in weapon making. He was dark by complexion, he was plain, he was muscular, he was challenging, he was adventurous, he was daring, he was physically very powerful, and he was the master in wrestling. So these are the nature and appearance within the character of Kapila. So everywhere you can find that power is ruling supreme, and that particular power is actually associated with the power of body, or maybe the power of physique, to be specific. So here you can get the iron heart body is actually antithetically represented with the typical soft body of Devadatta. He was very skilled in weapon making, and that particular category is also missing in Devadatta. He was dark complexioned, and you will find that Devadatta was fair looking. He was plain, but Devadatta is coming from the upper strata of society. He was muscular, but here you will find that Devadatta was missing the muscles. Kapila was challenging, adventurous, daring, and Devadatta was to some extent timid and weak. Kapila was physically powerful, and Devadatta was powerless, almost weak, and he was master in wrestling, and Devadatta was completely denying that particular form. So from the very beginning, so far as the appearance and nature of Kapila is concerned, you will find that Kapila is having that particular supremacy which Devadatta was lacking at the time. But in spite of having the differences, as I mentioned earlier, Devadatta was a true friend of Kapila, and Kapila was the same. Kapila reveres Devadatta. It is not that Kapila, so far as the societal perspectives or maybe the scholarship is concerned, or maybe the social status is concerned, as we have found that Devadatta's scholarship, you will find that Kapila reveres Devadatta's scholarship and high birth, and two bodies but one mind, one soul, that have been taken in consideration. So here it has been stated that a true friend of Devadatta, he reveres Devadatta's scholarship and high birth. So ultimately, what I'm trying to suggest here, it is not that Kapila was facing, it is true that Kapila was facing any kind of inferiority complex just because of Devadatta is having that and Kapila doesn't have, but rather, in spite of having the scholarship in Devadatta, in spite of having the knowledge in Devadatta, in spite of having the particular form of, you see, the supremacy in Devadatta, Kapila reveres him. The particular term reveres that I am trying to suggest here, that particular term reveres is referred to the kind of a respect that he has for Devadatta's scholarship, and obviously for high birth. So it is not a kind of a jealousy that was present within Kapila. It was not a kind of a jealousy that was present within Kapila's temperament. Rather, you will find that Kapila reveres Devadatta's scholarship and Kapila reveres Devadatta's high birth. And ultimately, in spite of multiple forms of differences that I have mentioned just now, you will find that Devadatta and Kapila, they both have two bodies, but one mind and one soul. And throughout the particular play, say for example, throughout the first half of this particular play, we can find that these references have been taken in considerations. Always, you will find that they have the two bodies, but one mind and one soul. Such a kind of a relationship has been taken place. Keep it in mind that in my last lecture, I was discussing about Kapila and Devadatta as Rama and Lakshmana, and as Lava and Kusha, as say Krishna and Balarama. But ultimately, that is the actual representation that have been taken place, that have been considered in this particular drama, that in spite of having such kind of differences, they are to be treated as having two bodies and one mind and one soul. Now, what happens, you know, that somehow, as we have found, as we have traced, that it was not possible for Devadatta to be advanced in the kind of a love affair between himself and Padmini if Kapila was absent there. And we find that Kapila's help in the love affair and final union between Devadatta and Padmini was altogether accepted by Devadatta, and at the same time, it was very important for this particular form. But as I mentioned just in a previous lecture and also here, that Kapila had a kind of a secret desire for Padmini. We cannot negate that. So that's why Kapila's initial reaction to Padmini at the first sight and her secret desire for her, it has to be taken in consideration here. So let us read a particular section from Hayavadana Act 1. Here, Kapila had gone to Pavanavithi, that means the particular place where Padmini was residing with her family, and Kapila gapes at her. And then the aside remark. As I mentioned earlier, the aside remarks are very important. Why? Because through the aside remarks, you see that we can trace, we can identify the mind or maybe the psyche of these characters. Here Kapila gapes at her. Here her means Padmini, aside, and he says, I give up, Devadatta. I surrender to your judgment. I hadn't thought anyone could be more beautiful than the wench Ragini, who acts Rambha in our village troupe. But this one, you are right, she is Yakshini, Shakuntala, Urvashi, Indumati, all rolled into one. So it is not simply, what I'm trying to suggest here, that it is not simply a particular kind of a description, it is not simply a particular kind of a reference that is actually, to some extent, that is actually focusing on the beauty of Padmini. It is true, at one point it is a description on the beauty of Padmini. But at the same time, can you not find that in that particular reference, we can find that actually Karnad is trying to make the inner section of Kapila's heart open, Kapila's mind open, or maybe Kapila's psyche open. So that is the fundamental focus that Karnad is trying to incorporate. And later on, throughout the play, we will find that Kapila loves to be in companionship with Padmini. Okay, loves to be in in the family of Devadatta and Padmini. It is not simply because of kind of a relationship between Kapila and Devadatta. Rather, a kind of, because we have already traced that in the words, in the activities or behaviors of Devadatta, it had already been come to the forefront that Devadatta doesn't like Kapila's presence any longer. Rather, we can find that why Kapila continues to be in the close companionship of Padmini, it is probably the psychological insight is being taken place. So that is the sole reason why when Devadatta informs Kapila that the journey that they are planning, it must not have to be taken place. At that time, the initial reaction of Kapila was very striking. Why? Because it is actually indicating that he was so much frustrated. He was so much, in a typical despairing mood that it was not taken place. So ultimately, he was thinking that if that had not to be taken place, then ultimately he can no longer hold himself from keeping a close contact with Padmini any longer. And throughout the text, throughout the first section of the text, we find that Kapila's activities, Kapila's behavior with Padmini, it is somehow striking, and it actually reveals his inner desire for her. But at the same time, we cannot negate the typical form of loyalty, the typical form of the mind that he is keeping regarding Devadatta. Devadatta was truly his friend, and somehow he cannot just prepare himself regarding the absence of Devadatta when Devadatta has sacrificed his own life at the altar of goddess Kali. So when he finds that Devadatta has already sacrificed himself at the altar of goddess Kali, then immediately Kapila considers himself, or Kapila thinks that I should also sacrifice myself at the time, because he is to some extent suffering from a kind of a guilt. What kind of guilt is there? Kapila considers that Devadatta, he had left Devadatta alone by going with Padmini. And at the same time, probably Kapila have failed the particular form that probably Devadatta doesn't like his presence, right? Because he might suspect the kind of feeling that he was keeping for Padmini. So such kind of guilt consciousness was present within Kapila, and immediately when he finds that Devadatta is dead, then he also sacrifices himself. So that particular representation, that particular kind of behavior of Kapila is actually indicating towards his temperament, his loyalty, his friendship in general. Okay. Now, the next point, it says that Kapila's immediate reaction after the transposition. Yes, that is the fundamental focus that I should make here. So here you will find that Kapila's immediate reaction, what is happening? After the transposition, Kapila does have at the time the body of Devadatta. Okay. So as I have said that he had a secret desire for Padmini. Now what happens, that when he had got Devadatta's body, at the same time, he could feel what Devadatta's body had made to Padmini. That is, Padmini is now pregnant, and it indicates towards multiple kinds of sexual relationship between these two bodies. And now Kapila is possessing that body. So the particular kind of restrainment, you see, that actually restrained Kapila from directly announcing his desire for Padmini, now it had completely abolished. And Kapila says that now Padmini is my wife, because at this very moment I am now possessing the body of Devadatta. So here the problem certainly arises. And what happens? We know that ultimately the head versus body debate starts, and at the end it has been decreed that the body is the diminutive to the head. The head is superior, so the head actually determines whose body it is. And ultimately, after that particular form, to some extent, Kapila gets frustrated and he resigned. It's his resignation, and to some extent, we will find that he is imposing a kind of, you say, quote unquote, self-imposed exile. He goes to the jungle with the body of Devadatta, okay, and his own head. And in the jungle, what he does, you see, with his particular kind of anger and frustration and despair, everything, you see, he never returns to the society any longer. He lives in the jungle, right, with the inhabitants of the jungles and woods. And with his iron determination, he gradually transforms his body, that is Devadatta's body, to his own. In the like way, as Devadatta's, say Kapila's body has been made Devadatta's body at the end of the play, we find that with his iron determination, Kapila tortures over his body and finally transforms Devadatta's body, which he is possessing at this moment, in its new or maybe original shape. That is the particular kind of a shape that I have pointed out that he had. Okay. And in a later discussion, we have found that when it was a discussion going on between Kapila and Padmini, and when Padmini asked that how you have become successful in transferring your body, that is Devadatta's body, into becoming your own, then Kapila said that it was a very hard task, you see, because the body was not habituated with such kind of torture that I had to do with this body. So here you will find that this iron determination and the torture over his body, and it got finally transferred to its original shape. What happens, that as it has been indicated by the dolls, that somehow it will happen one day that Kapila, that Padmini will meet Kapila again. So when Padmini comes to Kapila's house, as we find in the wood, then the initial reaction of Kapila was to avoid her. But when Padmini comes in close contact with Kapila, you see, then the body, that is the body of Devadatta, now it has been transformed into the body shape of Kapila. Now it makes him remember everything, the kind of relations that have been taken place between Devadatta's body and Padmini. It now makes him remember all these things. Somehow that is the fundamental situation, a fundamental section that I should refer to here. So let us read a particular section. It is from Hayavadana Act 2, towards the end of the play. We find that there is a kind of discussion that is going on, or a conversation that is going on between Padmini and Kapila. So Kapila asks Padmini, "Why did you come? You came. You touched me. You held my hand, and my body recognized your touch. I have never touched you, but this body, this appendage, laughed and flowered out in a festival of memories The memories are very important, to which I am an outcast because I am not prepared for such kind of memories. Padmini says, poor Kapila, don't pity me. Padmini says, be quiet. Stupid. Your body bathed in a river, swam and danced in it. Shouldn't your head know what river it was? What swim? So you see that the river and swim, all these things are actually symbolically representing towards the bodily references, you see. That means it is indicating towards the sexual consummation, sexual relations and references. Your head too must submerge in that river. So what your body knows, your head doesn't. So now it is the time that your head also to identify, to feel what your body actually felt. So that is actually indicating towards the further resolution of the sexual reference. The flow must rumple your hair, run its tongue in your ears, and press your head to its bosom. So everywhere these are the sexual references. Until that is done, you will continue to be incomplete. Kapila raises his head and looks at her. She caresses his face like a blind person trying to imprint it on its fingertips. Then she rests her head on his chest. My Kapila, my poor, poor Kapila, how needlessly you have tortured yourself. And Kapila lifts her up and takes her in. So that is indicating. Bhagavata says, now you will find here the Bhagavata and female chorus. They are actually performing the role of the chorus, and they are actually indicating, they are actually focusing on a kind of a description that is going on there in a symbolic form. Bhagavata says you cannot engrave on water. So water is symbolic here. It is the flow, you see. So you cannot engrave on water, nor wound it with a knife, which is why the river has no fear of memories. So the memories are very significant, you see, right? The female chorus says it is actually that the river is actually indicating towards the sexual consummation, the relations. The female chorus says the river only feels the pull of waterfall. Okay, so you can feel the pressure, you can feel the pool of waterfalls have been taken. This is indicating of the psychological anguish also altogether, the psychological strain and psychological movements that have been related to the sexual implications. The river only feels the pool of the waterfall. She giggles, tickles, rushes on the banks, then turns atop of dry leaves in the navel of the whirlpool, weaves a water snake in the net of silver strands, in the green depths, frightens the frog on the rug of moss, sticks and bamboo leaves, sings, tosses, leaps, and sweeps on in a rush. So this is indicating towards the physical references, obviously. And in a symbolic way, Carnot is referring to that particular form. So the heart's cravings have been completely being fulfilled. So somehow up to this, you will find that Kapila's temperament, Kapila's change of temperament, transposition, that is very significantly, very important part. At the end, you will find two particular things have been discussed here or pointed out here. And the first one is his reaction to Padmini's son. He considered that it is the son that is given by Devadatta's body, and now he is possessing his body. So he doesn't disown the son. He considers him as his own son, and it is in his choice, the choice made by Padmini also, that the first half of the son's life has been passed in the jungle just because he is the son of Kapila. The second part is to be passed in the city because he was also the son of Devadatta. So that was the fundamental reaction that he does, reaction he puts. The final meeting with Devadatta and the final duel and death. So he also sacrifices himself at the altar of, to some extent, friendship, because he cannot, it might be possible that he might choose that I must not take part in this final duel, but he chooses just because he actually gives much more focus to the friendship, and that's why he also takes part in the final duel and to some extent sacrificing himself. So that is up to this, that is the character and the implications of Kapila's life and Kapila's temperament, and how so far these are important. Now, in a very nutshell, let us take a look between these two characters, that is Devadatta, as I mentioned in my last lecture, and Kapila here. So let us take a look of these two. So now, here you will find Devadatta versus Kapila. Okay, so by appearance, you will find that Devadatta is fair and handsome, and Kapila is a dark complexioned. By caste, Devadatta is from the upper caste, that is Brahmin. Kapila is a blacksmith. Devadatta's education, that is, Devadatta is highly educated. Kapila is not good. That is, probably about his education, it is not being properly mentioned by Girish Karnan in the play. So far as physical prowess is concerned, you will find that Devadatta doesn't have that. Whereas Kapila, the physical prowess is maximum, obviously. And what is the weakness? In case of Devadatta, the weakness is love and jealousy. Now, love is not to be considered as a weakness. But if love brings to jealousy, then obviously love itself is a cause for the jealousy. And it is the weakness that is present in Devadatta. But in Kapila, the weakness is his desire, obviously. And what is the strength? Devadatta's strength is his knowledge, but Kapila's strength is his loyalty. So that is the fundamental thing that I should discuss here, and I have already discussed. So try to go through the text carefully. Try to identify the sequences, sections, the speeches. Try to memorize them, and while write an answer on the character of Devadatta and role of Devadatta and also the role of Kapila, or maybe the characterization and the contrast between these two, you will need the particular references of the text to justify your answers, justify your argument, okay? And in this particular way, it will be helpful to you. So today up to this, thank you then.